All right, everybody, welcome back to the Seven Figure Seller Summit Mastermind Series. Today, I'm super excited to have Tomo Matsuo with Yardline with us here today. How's it going, Tomo?
Great, fantastic. Great to see you, Gary. Been a fan for a while, so thanks for having us.
Excellent, excellent. So today, Tomo is joining us from the finance world. He's an expert of all things finance, helping you to better understand how to deploy your capital. And then today, we're kind of going to do a conversational style session. So I'd love for you guys to get involved as well if you have any questions, especially as we unpack this topic for today. We're going to cover the 3 ways to deploy capital to scale your Amazon and e-commerce business. All right. So before we begin, because we are live, if you can see and hear us, can you please type your name and where you're joining us from in the chat, just so we know. All right. So I'd like to quickly introduce Tomo before we begin. And Tomo Matsuo is the president of Yardline Capital. And what they do is they're a provider of growth capital, business tools, and competitive insights for sellers on Amazon, eBay, Etsy, Shopify, and other platforms. Okay, so prior to launching Yardline, Tomo was the senior vice president with lending solutions for PaySafe, and they were into the integrated payments platform. He's worked with over 250,000 e-commerce customers before. And then prior to that, Tomo was the COO at BizFi in Japan. And that is an online SMB, small, medium business lending platform that provided over $2 billion in financing to 35,000 small businesses. All right. And then something cool that I just learned about Tomo is that outside of the office, Tomo is super passionate about the performing arts. And he's formally trained as a pianist and conductor. And then he serves as the music director and conductor of the 92Y Orchestra. This is the oldest community orchestra in New York. So he's based in New York with his wife, Kimberly. All right. So Tomo, again, super excited to have you here. And then just before we begin, just a quick couple of quick shout outs. Welcome, Sean from Florida. Great to have you here. All right. So we got a lot of questions that were pre-submitted. And then if you guys have any questions to be answered live, I'd love for you guys to answer them as well. And interestingly enough, Tomo, I don't know if you had a chance to review some of our pre-webinar survey results, but in the survey, one of the key questions we asked was, do you ever delay or short order inventory because of cash flow issues? Okay. And then 51% of the sellers that participated said yes, they do delay and short order inventory because of cash flow issues. So it seems like this is one of the big issues. But I'm curious, just to start out, what are you seeing, like, with the pulse of the marketplace right now from the finance side, looking at especially the Amazon e-commerce ecosystem? I'm curious, what are you?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. And very, very great to see everybody, and looking forward to a very sort of lively and interactive session here. In terms of, so I think, if I can give you a little bit of context, Gary, I think it'll be a little bit more helpful in terms of why Yardline exists. Because it really sort of speaks to your question, actually. Yardline is a platform, is fairly new, and it's actually a COVID founding story as a company. Gary, sort of thank you very, very much for that very generous intro. You make me sound very, very good. But while I was at PaySafe, building out the proprietary financing business for their 300,000-400,000 small business customers, my co-founder called me up and said, hey, there's this opportunity. He was at the time with Thrasio, and we spun out of Thrasio, as you may know. So so during COVID, what was really happening, the market conditions that were taking place was e-commerce really was booming, as this audience very well knows. And when e-commerce booms, there's need for inventory capital, marketing capital, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of working capital needs. So there was a lot of demand for credit in the marketplace. What was also happening is, because of COVID, all these banks and online lenders and alt lenders, so on and so forth, stopped originating or stopped lending to everybody, right? If you recall this, right? And unfortunately, for those sellers in the U.S., for example, when PPP loans came up, where sort of the PPP program came out, that really didn't help e-commerce businesses, because e-commerce businesses, many e-commerce businesses, they don't have a lot of payroll, right? So it didn't really help them in terms of covering their needs from a capital perspective. So when Ari and I were discussing this, and Thrasio, as many of you know, have a lot of knowledge and know-how and expertise around operating these businesses. So there might be a really interesting way to commercialize the Thrasio platform and help small businesses, because they really do need this working capital. And so as sort of part of the Thrasio family, we love the small business sellers, or the e-commerce sellers out there. We really wanted to sort of figure out how to help them and help them grow and give them the capital that they need, and that's why Yardline was born. And so Ari and I virtually shook hands over a Zoom call, or maybe it was a StreamYard call, I don't know, Gary, to start this business, and called it Yardline. And so the premise of Yardline and Yardline Capital is, while Thrasio is using their expertise to acquire these businesses, Yardline will be financing these businesses, and also couple that with a lot of expertise and advice, and so on and so forth. So we have a seller success program to do that. So I think what's really important is, with COVID, there was a massive sort of increase in need for inventory capital, and it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise, because, and also it really exponentially sort of made that pain, because of all the supply chain issues that also took place, right? So there was a tremendous amount of demand from the consumer side for buying online for your products. There was a cash flow crunch. Suppliers needed their money. And then we got into a situation. We ran into a lot of sellers, for example, who were putting their shipments on air and shipping it by air and accepting instead, because and paying a much higher premium for that relative to sea, right? Because of the cash flow crunch and the supply chain issues, because nobody wants to stock out, right? So from a macro perspective, I think and sorry to blab, but I think COVID really sort of increased the need for that. And people, and sort of folks like Yardline is here to help and really sort of give a lot of relief and sort of advice along with it.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks for giving us that overview. And I agree. I mean, COVID really accelerated a lot of things, and especially for e-commerce, that's a big impetus. We're seeing tremendous growth. I mean, some people say, COVID has been kind of like a shot in the arm, kind of like a growth serum for Amazon sellers and e-commerce on the whole. So I definitely, see that Yardline is riding that wave. I think it's very cool that you guys are providing capital services for Amazon sellers. So before we get into the questions, I also like to welcome a couple other people that just joined us live. Welcome to Sue Johnson, and also welcome to Anthony in Illinois. All right, so it's great to have everybody. And one of the questions that we pulled the audience, Tomo, was one that actually Yardline had asked us to submit to the audience, and that was, if your business had an additional $30,000, how would you use it, right? So imagine if you had additional 30K deposited into your bank account for your business, how would you use it? I'm curious, for the people that are watching us live right now, Sean, Sue, Anthony, and everyone else, if you had an additional 30K for your business, how would you use it? So I think that could be one of the first topics that we can talk about, if you're okay with that, Tomo. Just in terms of capital allocation, how to deploy capital. Some people were asking, is there a way to find the optimal capital allocation among different opportunities, whether to invest into inventory or building a brand, or even just keeping a buffer. I'm curious, what would you advise from your perspective, Tomo?
Well, if you ask Elon Musk, he'll say, buy Dogecoin or Bitcoin, right? And maybe these days, a few months ago, maybe it would have been GME or AMC or some crazy stock like that. That probably would have been a really, really good idea, right? In all seriousness, though, in terms of the capital, $30,000 is a very, very specific number. And $30,000 for a $3 million top line business is very different than a $30,000 top line business. So maybe what I should do is talk just generally what we're seeing in terms of use of funds and how we sort of see the usage of financing in sort of an offensive way, right? That makes sense for e-commerce sellers based on what we're seeing. In terms of what we're seeing that's coming through the door, right? Because we're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of small businesses and speaking with them and their pain points, why they need the capital and what they're using it for, so on and so forth. What we're seeing is about 60% of the use of funds is for inventory, about 30% is for marketing, and about 10% is for product improvement or new product launches. And so, that's sort of the general, direction that we're seeing in the market. And I think that makes sense, right? And I think that really sort of, points to the specific sort of pain points or opportunities that exist in sort of a seller's life cycle. So one of the things, maybe, Gary, I can show a slide if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
And I'll go ahead and share.
Okay, just one sec.
Yep.
Bring that up. Okay, there
Right.
we go.
Yeah, I think I see it. So this is something that we talk with our customers a lot in terms of sort of understanding how best to utilize your capital. Because utilizing your capital for defensive purposes is not the best way to use it. It's really we're constantly looking to grow the businesses and optimize the businesses, right? So this is a slide that sort of articulates a concept called the growth capital math. And this may not apply to every business, like a branded seller versus a drop shipper or reseller, so on and so forth. But generally speaking, I think this is probably true. And the math goes like this, right? I'm not sure if I point to something, does it show? Okay, it does show. So let's just say that you have a sample sort of business that's doing top line sort of $100,000 a month in top line, right? A typical sort of expense structure might look like and if this is FBA, right? 36% FBA fees with all the sort of shipping and storage and facilitation, so on and so forth, right? Let's say COGS and Gary, I'll lean on you on this one. I think 26%, maybe 30% is a good estimation for COGS for a lot of these businesses. Let's say you should be advertising around 10%. 10% should be about your advertising sort of spend relative to your revenues. And let's just say other expenses, maybe payroll and other sort of expenses that the business incurs, right? And the sort of bottom line profit margin, EBITDA margin, about 20%. I think this is Gary, I'd love your thoughts on it. I think this is a pretty representative sort of P&L for an average FBA seller. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it looks about right. I think the only variable that could have a big discrepancy is advertising, because right now for Amazon PPC, as you know, Tomo, it's becoming kind of like a pay-to-play game. We've had various speakers, like experts like Ritu Java come in, and it's like one of the more white hat ways you can rank and you can scale your business. So there's some people, they're running campaigns at like 90% ACoS or even 100% ACoS, so that could be higher.
Right.
But I think everything else, that is a variable, right? It depends.
That is a variable.
But
That is an absolute variable.
But on the whole, I think you're on the right track. Tomo.
Yeah. Well, we like for example, if we're saying sub 10%, I think our recommendation typically is that you're probably not advertising optimally. There's probably a little bit more room to advertise and get a little bit more incremental revenue. But anyway, 10 to 15% is what we typically see in terms of percent of revenues, right? So now let's just say that you have a business like this, and so a typical, so let's just say a Yardline or some other growth capital provider hypothetically says, we're going to advance you or fund you a month's worth of revenues or a month's worth of disbursements. So let's just say we're going to fund this business $100,000 in growth capital, right? A typical sort of way of really optimizing that $100,000 will look like this. We think if you spend 60,000, and not to go into sort of nitty-gritty details of the math, let's just say you're going to spend 60,000 of that on inventory or COGS, right? And then 40,000 of that on additional incremental advertising, right? So that $60,000 in COGS, right, using the same sort of ratio, is going to net to another $250,000 in top line revenue, right? And then advertising is let's assume it's going to be a little less optimized because you're grabbing more market share, you're selling more, and so it's going to be a little less optimized, but you're still selling for $250,000 worth of goods using $40,000 in ad spend, right? And so and let's just say that the capital cost is 10, 11, 12%. Many of you have used Clearbank, for example, or seller funding or Yardline, right? I think this is a pretty sort of representative, cost structure for that. And so based on all of that, you lever your business that's doing $100,000 a month in top line revenue. You get $100,000 a month worth of revenue, right? And you buy the inventory, you sell it, right? And now you're making incremental EBITDA margin or EBITDA of $35,000 on that, right? Virtually with no risk, because the concept is, more and more consumers are going to the platform searching for your products, generally speaking, right? So if you can optimize the business, right? So what your original question was, if you have $30,000, what would you do, right? So I would say it probably would look something like this. I would take a portion of that to buy more inventory, and then to take a portion of that to optimize marketing to create more revenues and create more bottom line profits for you as the seller.
Right. Okay. No, that's great. And I think this is a great high level picture of what you can do with this, right? I mean, you can buy more inventory, and just taking a look at the chat, several of our audience members would do that exactly. Sue Johnson says that she would buy more product, and then Sean Cobb says, I would definitely scale my products to the maximum and launch other high demand products in the queue, right? So I think that would be the top thing. And
I would say this is probably the most immediate, right? Because you don't this way you don't need to launch new. Like, I completely agree with Sean. Like, you always have to be iterating on your own products. You always have to sort of think about the next product iteration, the product launch. But this is something that you can do immediately, right? It's like pouring gas on fire. It's like you really go from 100,000 and sort of boost that, right? Without taking any sort of equity dilution.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And then I'm just looking at some of the other questions. I mean, definitely, inventory. I mean, it makes sense. We want to buy more inventory, but one of the other big challenges a lot of sellers face is cash flow, just managing the cash flow. Do you have any tips for sellers, like any best practices for managing cash flows to ensure optimal inventory levels, making sure your costs are paid on time, etc. I'm curious because you're kind of like the COO. Like, we kind of have a, 6K salary annual COO Tomo with us on the call. So I think this is a super valuable opportunity, guys. I mean, definitely, ask him some tough financial questions so we can get some good value out of this. But what are your thoughts about that, Tomo? Cash flow management.
Yeah. What was the number that you're offering me to be your COO, Gary? I'll take that job.
I was just pulling a number out of thin air. I mean, that would be like the market analysis, but yeah.
There you go. In terms of cash flows, maybe we should stop sharing this unless you want to keep it up.
Okay, yeah, let's remove this.
Yep, sure.
Okay,
sure.
There we go.
In terms of cash flows, I mean, I don't think there's anything very, very magical. You guys know your business, right? You guys should be looking at your P&Ls very, very, sort of closely. First thing is you can't improve or track something without being able to really measure it and track it, obviously, right? So track something without tracking, of course. But you can't improve it, right, without being able to measure it and understanding what are the levers to pull. And so I think with e-commerce, what we just showed are really the major sort of levers, right? You have the COGS lever, the marketing lever, and then right, and so those are the two sort of main levers. I think the biggest issue that we run into, or that we see that the sellers put themselves into a little bit, is growing a bit too fast through and taking on too much leverage. Now, that may seem a little counter, a little bit, against what I was saying, right? What I was saying is, hey, you should take capital to grow, absolutely. But if you take too much capital and take on too much COGS risk and inventory risks, right, then that we all also know that IPI scores start to drop, right? FBA cost starts to rise, that starts to eat into your margins, right? Maybe competitors are starting to tweak their products, and meanwhile you're sitting on a large sort of inventory that is a little bit outdated. So and then meanwhile maybe you took on a lot of debt to be able to accomplish that. Maybe you took it, sort of 3 or 4 different positions from various sort of alt lenders and lenders in the world, right? I think that's the kind of so I would say inventory management is probably absolutely key. And sort of buying the optimal level of inventory so that you are sort of managing FBA cost and you are being able to sort of without having to stock out, right? And I would sort of ask you, Gary. I mean, you're the absolute expert when it comes to supply chain, and so I'd love to get your point of view on this.
In terms of cash flow management, right?
Yeah, well, cash flow management as it relates to supply chain, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is what all the supply chain experts get paid the big bucks for, right? I mean, people at Walmart, they have to forecast demand, 6 to 9 months down the line. They've, right now we're speaking, in May, right? They've already placed all of their Q4 orders and, making sure they're, booking a space on that boat so it doesn't get delayed, right? So I think, one of the things you can do is if you do have history with your e-commerce business, definitely look at especially the seasonal demand levels where, Q4 for many sellers, holiday shopping season, that's like, the fourth quarter in basketball is a winning time, right? I think Michael Jordan said that. So your sales could double, right? But, keep that in mind as you're managing your cash flow. I mean, you got to make sure you have enough cash to place those big orders at least 3-4 months down prior, just so that, you're not, your bank account isn't depleted, right? You don't want to, go into the battle without enough fuel in the tank, so to speak, right? So definitely I would look at, try to forecast that at least 3-6 months in advance. And then this year, there's the unique situation with the whole logistics logjam and the headaches going on all over the world, from the Suez Canal that was backed up a couple months ago to, now still West Coast, US. We're seeing a lot of disturbances, even in India, with the COVID cases, which is very unfortunate. Many of the manufacturers are shut down because everyone's, trying to keep safe, right? So definitely talk to your suppliers, make sure that, they're able to deliver and try to submit those orders early so you don't get, you don't miss the boat, so to speak. So I think those would be some of my top recommendations. But I could talk for hours about this. So, we have so much more to cover as well. So, yeah, definitely. And another comment that I saw in the chat from Sean. And I saw there was another comment from Anthony as well. But before we move on to the next topic, let's just say, Sean. Oh, I think Tomo's just dropped. We'll give him a second to come back on. Sean asks, would storing extra inventory in 3PLs be more cost efficient as opposed to shipping directly from the manufacturer? It could be, Sean. I would say, especially right now. Welcome back, Tomo. We lost you for a minute. Yeah, no worries. So we were just talking about Sean's next question about storing extra inventory in 3PLs. Would that be more cost efficient as opposed to shipping directly from the manufacturer? I would say right now, if you're shipping by sea, Sean, the prices are very high. So if you do ship a larger shipment, it may be more cost effective to ship, one large shipment rather than 2 smaller shipments, and then storing that in a 3PL. And then that way, let's say if the 3PL is local, like in California, if it's not too far from your Amazon fulfillment center, then yes, that could save on cost, but definitely run the numbers because, I don't know how big of, cubic volume we're talking about. Are we talking about 1 container? Are we talking about, 10 containers? And also talk to your 3PL as well. How much will they charge for this? How much do they have room? Are they, how much do they have like a monthly fee? One of the 3PLs I used in the past, they charge like a minimum $250 a month fee, even if I didn't do anything, right? So definitely look at the numbers. That's what I would suggest. Any thoughts on that, Tomo? I don't know about.
Yeah, well, we typically see, the more optimized folks do, like, and the because we really like to track the FBA fees, right, on a month-over-month basis, whenever we underwrite these businesses, and so that is a really important metric for us, from an underwriting perspective, and those businesses or sellers that really have consistent, whether it's 30% across the board or 50% across the board, whatever it is, without having sort of the jagged lines let that go like this, right? Are utilizing the 3PLs very, very well, I would say. They ship, they keep a bulk of the sort of the product in 3PLs, and they sort of very systematically release it into the FBA. And I think that's probably, I'll lean on you, Gary, but that, at least based on our observation, that seems to be the winning strategy for most sellers.
Yeah, it seems logistics, that's one of the keys to the game, keys to winning in 2021, right?
Yep, absolutely.
With all of that. So that could be another topic if you guys are interested. We can do a future topic about logistics. But let's come back to finance and capital.
And by the way, so I want to sort of add to that, Gary. Sorry. So because I think I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of IPI score maintenance and how to sort of track that and optimize for that. But it's sort of like IPI scores, for an FBA seller, like a FICO score, a credit score, on the consumer side, right? It's really that important because it really gives us an really understanding of how that business is being run. Right. So when we correlate these stockouts or inventory sort of levels and the inventory churns and the IPI scores and the FBA fees, those are all very, very correlated. So typically what we do see is the better the IPI scores, the better the sellers, right? The more scaled they are, they have more sophisticated scalable systems in place and processes in place, and those are the sellers who are going to get more money at a cheaper rate for a longer term, and that is highly correlated. So you're right. I think that could be a completely sort of a session on its own. But I would highly recommend that those of you who are FBAs to really dig into the IPI scores and see what you can do to optimize that.
That's a really awesome analogy, Tomo. Your Amazon IPI score or your inventory performance index, it's kind of like your credit score, right? In real life. If you want to take out a loan, if you want to make a purchase of that car or house, they're going to look at that score, right? So the same analogy applies. It's probably a good indicator of how healthy your Amazon business is, right? If your score is low, there's probably a lot of slow moving inventory. Maybe you're racking up those long-term storage fees, but if you're fast moving, your score is going to be healthy. And for outside, like Yardline, would you say that that's like a positive indicator if someone has a really strong IPI score?
That is a positive indicator, and it correlates very well with performance as well. And what's interesting also is I'll give you an example of somebody that we saw recently. This is a really, really scaled business. They pre-COVID they were doing a great. I'm not going to go into sort of the product category and everything else, but they were doing really, really well. But once COVID hit, they shifted their business and they really focused on PPE. So they got a lot of PPE, sort of masks and gloves and that sort of, and they bought in bulk and they started selling that. So they saw sort of spike through 2020, but then after sort of the PPE rush, right, and the sort of whole COVID rush stopped, and they decided to sort of switch back to their old business because they got these PPE sort of goods at an elevated sort of cost. Right. So now they were sitting on all this inventory. It's all sitting in FBA. FBA fees are starting to go up. IPI score is going down. Right. And so the business clearly was having some issues because they weren't able to move the inventory. Right. And so we can clearly see that if you look at sort of the history of the IPI score, and you immediately know that there was something that happened or something occurred to that business. So absolutely, it really is like a FICO score. I mean, think of it as it's as important to your business as sort of credit or credit profile, if you will, as FICO scores are.
Yeah. And Sean agrees. He says great advice on the IPI. So guys, you can't manage what you're not measuring. So definitely, check out your IPI score. That could be one of the the keys to unlock your success and also to get more capital from people like Yardline. All right. So let's take the next question. Keeping, talking about inventory. So Anthony, I love your image and your handle. Make them laugh till it hurts. Anthony in Illinois. Do you think FBM from home will become bigger to offset storage fees? So we're talking about fulfilled by merchants. Any thoughts on that, Tomo, or do you want me to tackle this?
Why don't you? I mean, I'd love to hear how you tackle that, and I'll give you sort of the financing angle of it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. I mean, traditionally, pre-COVID, I've sold numerous products on Amazon. I've sold both FBA and FBM, and I would say like the sell-through rates it was like a lot higher on FBA versus FBM before COVID. I would say it would be about 3 times in the categories that I sold on. But since COVID, a lot has changed because Amazon's warehouses are fully packed. They can't keep up. So they're placing more emphasis on FBM. So things have changed. I don't know what the exact figure would be, but I sense from the people that I'm talking to that FBM is gaining more traction, especially nowadays. You can even offer seller fulfilled prime FBM. So I do see that this could be a better potential. There's also certain products that FBA, Amazon, they don't allow in their warehouses. I mean, some hazmat products. I mean, make sure you can sell it, but there were certain products in my category that they simply didn't allow in FBA, and we had to do FBM. So I would, Anthony, I would look at your product specifically, and then also with the fulfillment fees to kind of do like a pro and con analysis based on that. Those would be my thoughts. What do you think, Tomo?
What we're seeing, completely agree with you, and I think it mirrors what we're seeing, which is FBA sort of storage capacities are shrinking, generally speaking, and so sellers are having a difficult time really storing the appropriate amount of inventory at FBA. So more and more sort of sellers are utilizing 3PLs and other methods to sort of store the products. And going back to what we had talked about, the worst thing that you can do is stock out, right? I mean, that by the way, stocking out is probably the worst thing that could happen from an IPI score perspective, right? So it goes back to the IPI score concept. So you don't want to stock out, but you also don't want it to go down to a trickle, right? Because you're running out of inventory. So you do have to sort of manage that. And I as a result of that, I think you're seeing more and more sort of shift, the volume shift to FBM, certainly, from FBA.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. All right. Thanks, Anthony. We hope that helps. All right. So we talked a little bit about inventory. Should we move on to the second key area about deploying capital, marketing and branding? And I saw that there was a question earlier, also from Anthony, who said with that 30,000, he would pay for high quality photos and listing optimization. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that? Like in terms of deploying capital into marketing, what would you recommend sellers?
Well, I'm not as close to this part of it, but but in terms of the market specifically, sort of quality photos and listing optimization, sort of aspects of it. But we do have a seller success program, and this is we have a group of Amazon experts. When you become a Yardline client, we have a seller success manager be assigned to each seller, and that they go through what we call a Yardline 50 business assessment, which essentially it goes through all sort of the lowest hanging fruit items, if you will. We're looking at inventory, we're looking at marketing, we're looking at listings, product, sort of the copy, so on and so forth, and looking for any areas that are risks. So we should probably change, and any areas that we can go on offense. And one of the things that we do, typically see is absolutely, we see a lot of, sellers or resellers, especially use stock photos, right? They're still using Alibaba photos on their listings, right? There's so many different things that you can do with not that much money. You don't even need $30,000 to take high quality pictures. We see, Garrett, you probably know more better than I in terms of what's the optimal number of pictures that you should show these days on the listing, right? There's a lot of movement towards showing video as part of your listings, right? I think that's a trend that we're seeing. Absolutely. I do think is it as high impact? Well, it depends on how sub-optimized listings are in terms of like, well, how do you utilize the hypothetical $30,000? But I would agree with Anthony that and you don't need $30,000 to do that, would be a really good sort of way to improve conversion rates and lower ACoS.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and just to recap what Tomo shared earlier, I believe he recommends if with that capital, you let's say you got 30K, right? 60% should go into inventory, 30% should go into marketing, and 10% should go into like new product launches, right? Is my understanding correct, Tomo?
Well, that's what we're seeing in terms of how our clients are in terms of what their use of funds or stated use of funds would be.
Right.
So it looks like 30% of our customers are specifically coming to us looking for capital for marketing purposes.
Oh, I see. Okay, 30% of your customers are looking for capital just for marketing. Okay.
Exactly right.
And what are they planning to do with that in marketing specifically? Are they going to invest, let's say, photos, listing optimization, or PPC? I mean, I think that's one of the big keys for success on Amazon nowadays.
And you mentioned it. I mean, I think it's mostly. I think the vast majority of dollars are going to PPC campaigns. And I want to highlight one of our partners and very, very close partners of ours is called Perpetua. And I'm sure many of you use Perpetua as sort of the advertising or ad tech platform to optimize your Amazon businesses. We have recently announced a partnership with them where Perpetua came up with a Perpetua Capital program powered by Yardline. And so what's happening in the background is, so think about sort of the effectiveness of that, right? You're using Perpetua, you're on the Perpetua platform. You're saying, hey, I think with Perpetua, I can deploy $50,000 in marketing dollars, and going back to that growth capital math chart, I can triple my business, I can quadruple my business, right? But how am I going to where am I going to get that $50,000? Well, here you go. So what Perpetua Capital does through Yardline is be able to sort of couple this opportunity from a PPC campaign perspective with the capital to be able to pay for it, and so through that channel we are seeing tremendous growth of the sellers on that platform, and who choose to utilize the capital to actually execute on that plan. So most of the dollars, I would say, is going to PPC. Again, sort of listing optimization, pictures. Those are great things. We should all be doing that. But the largest lift, I think, once you have that optimized, will be through PPC.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm curious for everybody watching in the audience, if you were going to put this money into marketing, where would you put it? Would you put it into PPC? Would you or would you be like Anthony, investing in photos, listing optimization, or even video, right? As Tomo said earlier. I mean, video, we see this is becoming more and more important. And even with video ads, right? The click-through rate is a lot higher for video than traditional ads, like sponsored product ads. And also, you can even tell your whole brand story in that short video, right? I mean, that's something that previously someone had to click through to your listing in order to see that, but you see a lot of brands doing that nowadays. So I'm curious if you guys can type in the chat, if you had this money for marketing, where would you invest it? I think marketing, that's one of the big ways to separate yourself as well. So yeah. So I know that Tomo, what else are you seeing in marketing? I mean, there's besides Amazon PPC, there's obviously Facebook ads, there's Google ads, and even talking about branding, right? I'm curious, what other best practices are you seeing that you can share with us?
What we're seeing actually is something more fundamental than that, I think, because I think what you're saying, that you're talking about, is sort of very broad, or I'm going to interpret that to be very, very sort of broad in terms of branding and right, so on and so forth. I know many of our listeners or our viewers are Amazon sellers, FBA sellers, I believe, right? But what we are starting to see is a lot of our sellers are coming to us for help to oftentimes get onto Amazon, but also expand horizontally from Amazon, right? So when you talk about sort of marketing, when you talk about Facebook and other sort of non-Amazon PPC ways of marketing, you're talking about sort of going D2C, right? And so going to Shopify, going to other sort of WooCommerce and other platforms, and really sort of building up your brand, and driving traffic to your site and selling, right, without having to pay the FBA fees. And I do think a lot of the sellers, right, especially once they build a brand sort of equity on Amazon, to start to do that, which makes absolute sense. So I see two sort of broad sort of movements. I see a diversification, from Amazon to other platforms. That's one, and then we also see internationalization. So we know that Amazon is an international platform, but we also know that Amazon is very siloed from market to market. And so I think I recently heard a statistic that 99% of German Amazon sellers don't sell in the US, for example. And I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's exaggerated, but I think the point is that a lot of folks who are selling there, who have very, very good products, don't sell in the US, the largest market there is, right? And part of that is it takes a lot of sort of effort. You have to set up the entities and bank accounts and the accounts and everything else. And if you're a US seller going to Europe, then there's a lot of sort of VAT issues and that sort of thing you have to deal with, right? So I think a lot of folks are now starting to figure out, and there are platforms and partners out there that can do this, is to grow outside within Amazon, but grow into the different markets. And so from a branding, from a marketing perspective, now it's not purely branding and marketing, but it's really sort of expanding your presence in the world, right? And I think those are really, really big opportunities that we're probably still pretty early in, because the infrastructure is not quite there yet. But those who are able to figure it out are seeing massive benefits from that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's one of the ways you can scale and you can grow your business, right? Entering in new marketplaces. And I was interviewing a 7-figure seller based in Lithuania, and then he said, rather than try to sell like 100 units a day in one marketplace, he sells like 10 units a day in 10 marketplaces, right? That's right. To him, that strategy has worked out very well. He was able to build and scale his business that way. So and I'm curious, does Yardline have any like geographic restrictions in terms of the sellers that they help? Are you guys primarily working with US based sellers, or is it global?
Yeah, we're primarily working the U.S. market and the U.S. sellers. We only started in a few months ago, as I mentioned. We're seeing tremendous growth, and we see tremendous opportunity in the U.S. market. We're tightly sort of partnered with Thrasio, as many of you know, and Thrasio has made announcements, entering UK, EU, Japan, China, and other markets, sort of on the map. No pun intended, and we intend to follow them into those areas as well. Going back to one of the sort of comments that you made, that there are some very interesting vendors out there, and I'd like to maybe mention one of them, if you don't mind, Gary. There's a partner of ours that we're about to make an announcement with, called Space Goats. Don't you love that name, Space Goats? It's a great company name, and they're based in Germany. And what they do is they take non-EU Amazon businesses and sellers, and they give them a turnkey solution to enter the EU and start selling in every EU market. Okay, so it is a really, really neat platform where they take care of all the VATs, the customs, everything that you have to sort of go through to set up shop in Europe. They give you a turnkey solution for that, and it is a really, really fascinating platform. We love those guys, and many of our U.S.-based sellers are taking advantage of this partnership to enter EU, and something for your viewers to maybe look into.
Interesting. Yeah. How do you spell that? Space Goats?
Space Goats. Literally SPACEGOATS. Space Goats.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they have this product called Galaxy. And so, and the Space Ghost people, if you guys get any referrals from this, make sure you send us a check.
All right.
Just kidding. But no, but they're great. They're absolutely great.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, that's very interesting. I mean, turnkey solution to selling EU Space Goats. Well, we'll have to check them out. All right.
We'll start to see that in different marketplaces too. But EU
Yes.
is in particular challenging because it's such a fragmented, as you know, very
Yeah.
fragmented. Right.
Okay, and I see Joe Rudler is on. Joseph is with us as well, so thanks for clarifying space.
There you
Guys.
go.
Awesome, thanks. All right, so we had another question. We had a comment from Virik. Awesome session, guys. I'm new to this. Invest in brand is for long term. That is for me. So yeah, so thanks for your comment. Definitely branding. That's one of the ways that we are seeing successful sellers differentiate themselves, right? Just from commodity sellers. So that's
And,
great.
and not only that, I mean that's the way to go, diversify the channels. You build a brand on one particular channel, and then you can really sort of take that and so we recently came across a seller, one of our favorite sellers. I think she took $250,000 of funding from us, and she runs a swimsuit business, and she has a few million followers on Instagram, right? And she is a Shopify business, and she's driving all this traffic from Instagram, right? And she has this massive following, and the entire amount that she got from us, she put it into influencer marketing. So she partnered up with a couple of really big influencers. She the entire amount went into that, and she I don't know what she did. Maybe double her business. I mean, we saw this massive spike from that, right? So keep on building that brand. Once you have sort of that critical mass, it's a great. I completely agree with this comment. Longer term sort of investment into brand is going to pay off. Great dividends.
100%. That's great advice. Thank you for that, Virik, and thanks for Tomo for sharing that case study. That's awesome. I mean, Instagram and social media, that's one of the ways to build an audience as well, and also to build up your brand. That's
exactly.
Great advice.
Exactly.
All right. So we have a little over 10 minutes remaining, and I'd just like to touch upon our last point that we were talking about. So in terms of the third thing that sellers should do when they deploy capital to grow their business. And Tomo, do you want to share a little bit about that first?
Sure. I mean, and in terms of the third one, so that's the third category of use of funds that we see most often. It is a smaller portion. Inventory is 60%. Marketing is 30%, and the rest, right? But among the rest, we see product development and new product launches. As sort of part of that good chunk of that 10%, remaining 10%, and we believe in that. We absolutely believe in that. E-commerce is a very fast moving environment. You have a lot of competitors. New sort of products are coming up. Copycat products are coming up. Slightly improved products are coming up right constantly. So I think some of our best sellers are constantly tweaking their product constantly. We had a baby goods business, a very scaled business, and they're based on the West Coast. And the principal of that business was going to China probably every other month, sort of going to the supplier with sort of going through the molds and tweaking and experimenting. And he's constantly doing that. And he told us that is his secret to the constant growth of his business, his exponential growth of his business, and he believes in that, and he really invests his time into that, right? And so what the other thing is too, and related to that is once you get to a certain scale, you need to start hiring people. E-commerce is a very efficient business model. You as one sort of principal can run a multi-million-dollar business. Now, going from sort of a few $1 million to 10, 20, 30, $50 million business is a totally different animal, we believe. And so at that point, you really need to start to hire some support, and you need to start focusing on the bigger things, and whether it's product or whether it's in the sort of branding, whether it's the longer term sort of branding initiatives and product initiatives. So you have to start thinking like a CEO at that point, right? And so I do think that the product, although small, because it's not an immediate sort of need from a capital perspective, right? But that is very important, and another thing that's gonna pay dividends longer term.
For sure, for sure. I love those 2 points you covered: the constant product improvement, and also once you get to scale, you need to hire out to delegate. So we have a comment from Anthony. So innovation with other sellers' products helps you stand out. What do you
Innovation
think?
with other sellers' products help you stand out. I'm not clarify that a
I'm
little
not.
bit.
Yeah, Anthony, if you want to clarify that, do you mean what do you mean by innovation with other sellers' products? Do you mean that you're tweaking other sellers' products, or are you modifying other sellers' products to help you stand out? If you'd like to clarify that, that would be great.
But innovation is always good, though, either way. So
Yeah.
always keep on innovating, and stay ahead of the market for sure.
For sure. I mean, even if you look at market leaders like Apple, right? I mean, they have to constantly innovate. Otherwise, Samsung's gonna surpass them, right? So they're.
Right.
I mean, to be honest, I think Apple's running a little stale. I mean, the latest iPhone doesn't look that much different than like the previous generation. Like iPhone 12 kind of reminds me of iPhone 4 that I had back in the day. But anyways,
I know, but it just keeps you in the network, though, Gary. Like they have all these, like like I recently got that AirTag. Now I have I don't know how many Apple products I have now. It's hard to move off of Apple now.
I know. It's like model. I'm an acolyte, because my wife wanted to get like a Samsung. I'm like, oh, then I can't FaceTime you, or that's like the perfect example. Like they have
exactly.
that whole brand. They have the ecosystem locked in, right? And
that's
you're
right.
like,
that's right.
It's like you're proselytizing like your family members.
My brother-in-law for a long time. My brother-in-law for a long time was like a totally anti-Apple. Right. And then the entire family is on Apple. We're sharing pictures and FaceTime and everything else. And eventually he said, you know what? Okay, well, I got to do it.
Yeah, he caved in.
He had to cave in. Anyway.
Right.
We digress.
Okay. Yeah. So Anthony says, yes, innovating, tweaking. So innovating with other sellers' products help you stand out. I mean, in my view, this day and age, I definitely would not just sell a Me Too product, right? I wouldn't try to sell the same thing as everyone else, because that would just lead to, you have no differentiation. That usually leads to a price war, a race to the bottom. And then the last thing you want to do is win a price war, right? I mean, there's like next to no margins there. So definitely, yeah.
I'd love to add to that a little bit from a financing underwriting perspective. We are looking at pricing trends. We're looking at how often we're running lightning deals, for example, right? How frequently in the last 30 days, the last 90 days, the last year, right? Has that frequency changed at all, right? And so the underlying sort of the issue at hand is, all right, so how much margin compression is this product experiencing, right? Or how many times do they have to drop prices to sort of keep them at the top of the rank, or it's like, right? So to your point, Gary, it becomes a race to the bottom from a pricing perspective. You don't keep on innovating and finding different ways to do that. So, we talked about IPI score. The other thing is to make sure that you keep on innovating, so you don't you don't have to keep on dropping price, right? To stay competitive, right? Because that's not going to be a long-term winning strategy.
Yeah, those are words of wisdom, right? I mean, you can't expect to be doing the same thing and getting different results, right? I mean, that's the definition of insanity. So you got to stay ahead, you got to innovate, and to keep your price up as well, right? So that's thanks for sharing that, Tomo. That was very insightful. I love how we can draw upon your experiences in the finance world to help us from the Amazon e-commerce world to sell more. All right, so we just have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to just thank you again, Tomo, for coming on tonight to share your insights. And I'm curious, for people that want to learn more, what's the best way to connect with you and to connect to Yardline?
Sure. If you want to reach out to me directly, Gary, you can flash my email address. I'm at tomo@yardline.com. please, come to yardline.com to learn more about what we do and then how we can help you grow and improve your businesses. We are more than just a financing partner for you. We truly want to be your partner in sort of the broad sense of the word, and that's what the people love about us. And so if you take a look at our customer reviews and Trustpilot reviews, you'll see what our customers are saying about us, and they just love how sort of integrated we are with their business. So come to yardline.com. Reach out to me directly. Always happy to chat, answer any questions. If to the extent that I can give you any advice with capital or anything that we talked about. So please feel free to reach out to me directly.
Definitely, and I've dropped the links in the chat. You can contact Tomo, and also you can find them at yardline.com, and then we have a URL for you guys as well. If you do want to use our URL, we will get credit for introducing you to Yardline. And I'm curious, what kind of sellers do you work with? Is there like certain years of experience or threshold? What would that look like?
It really is across the board, Gary. And so I think, we truly want to be this very, very wide spectrum, one-stop shop, if you will, for many levels of these businesses. And so, our financing range is anywhere from $5,000 to $1 million. And so, where we've seen businesses that are 3 months old to businesses that are 30 years old. We've seen businesses that are, swimming suits. We see businesses that are the complete opposite, right? So whatever the complete opposite of a swimming suit is, I don't even know. But we really see a lot of businesses, and and that's part of the fun. That's part of the benefit of a platform like ours. We see so much, and part of our sort of benefit also is that collectively, like I know Gary and the seven figure seller, your sort of tagline is made by sellers for sellers, and we have the same view of our platform. We came from Autothrasio, one of the biggest operators in the industry, where we're taking all the nuggets and the insights and the know-how, and we're really trying to commercialize that back and to help our customers and figure out what to do, what not to do, how to grow efficiently, right? And then if you guys are thinking about exits, right? I know Gary at day 5 of your summit, I think, is talking about exits, and so we can.
That's right.
We're certainly talking to many folks who are looking to exit and grow and exit, right? So it's really from the cradle, not the cradle to grave, but start to finish, right? We really like to partner up with these sellers. We love all of them.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tomo. And one last question before we let you go. I'm all about the 80-20 rule. So if we were to apply the 80-20 rule to everything we talked about today, all these different ways that you can deploy capital to grow your business, what would be your number one recommendation, Tomo, to our audience to help them grow and scale their Amazon business?
That's a really good question, man. The 80-20 rule. The number one thing is, grow responsibly. Make sure you're tracking right? Amazon does a great job of tracking all sorts of metrics for you. Whether it's IPI scores or inventory churns or transaction return rates, everything, right? And so to the extent you're operating on Amazon, make sure you really understand those numbers and metrics and what are sort of the good places to be, and dig in, double click into each of those metrics to understand what you can do to optimize, right? And so, this is not a cop-out answer, because I do want to just give you one answer, but I think it's everything, right? It's in totality. Look at your seasonality trends. Make sure that you're sort of thinking ahead. Make sure you're thinking ahead 3, 6, 12 months ahead, 24 months ahead in terms of product launches, right? It's going to take time to design and launch products, right? Make sure you're tracking your IPI score. Make sure you're tracking all the metrics that we talked about, because they all matter. And the better you become, the better you can scale, the more financing you can get, and the more financing you get, the faster you can grow. It's just this sort of flywheel effect that keeps on going, right? And the better you operate, you're just going to be afforded more opportunities to grow your business. And so that's sort of my advice, because we know as a financing platform, we look at everything, and we're looking at all the metrics, and I'm trying to understand what's working and what's not working. And you should do the same.
Perfect. Great advice, Tomo. So thank you again for coming on. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Definitely follow up with Tomo and Yardline to learn more. And we will see you guys at the next session. All right. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.